head, bones connected to the
cervical vertebrae. Huh. Cervical vertebrae. Ew.
It's weird that the most important part of rigging doesn't get mentioned a lot, putting the bones in the right place. A really good example of this is the clavicle. Even though the shoulders are sloping down, the clavicle is perfectly horizontal. Otherwise, when you shrug your shoulders, they would actually get further apart instead of going up and towards your ears. But hands down, the toughest piece of anatomy I've ever seen is a bird wing. Luckily, when we were out shooting reference footage, we got this one moment where the pigeon demonstrates exactly how a wing folds. Usually this happens so fast you can't see it, but I've probably looked at this 100 times because it's pure gold for animators. When it came time to model the pigeon, one of the things that we decided to do was that we modeled the wings perfectly to scale using the real proportions and everything from an actual pigeon wing. That let us use the real layout of the bones, especially this hidden shoulder bone in there that you'd never know about unless you researched the anatomy. Now, the feathers were also pretty tough, so we ended up just using set-driven keys to spread and fold the outside part of the wing. You just have to be careful that no matter what position they're in, each feather still stacks up in the right order and they don't intersect. We also wanted to add some flexibility to the wing, so we ended up just doing that with blend shapes on each object. Originally I had this tied to springs so that they automatically bend according to the motion, but after doing one or two shots like that I realized that I hate rigs that move things on their own. It looks cool on a rigging reel, but the animator spends more time fighting the automation that it saves. So I prefer to keep things simple and just give the animator a control for everything. Now, one other thing that I tried with the pigeon is something called a broken rig. Broken rigging just means that the different parts aren't really connected. Now, it sounds like that might be hard to animate, but in reality it's a lot faster because you're not spending as much time fighting with the rig. The spine of an actual bird is S-shaped, which is why they can extend their heads all over the place. But I just used a null instead of bones so that you can move the head anywhere you want without the limits of a normal skeleton. The only other control in there is that there's an extra null in the neck that just stays between the body and the head to help smooth things out. And that's also useful because we can scale that up and down to help keep the volumes on the neck right. Now, if you do go with a broken rig, you can always put some constraints on there as well, so if you need it to be connected for some reason, you can still do that. A good example of this would be when the pigeon is flying. We do want to keep the head locked to the body, so we just turn on the constraint. Now, there's one last trick that comes in really handy when you're doing IK chains, like for a leg. A lot of times people will build these in a perfectly straight line. But then you get this problem where the knee will start to snap as it goes back to its default pose. There's a bunch of different workarounds people have used for this, like soft IK, but a much easier solution is to just build the bones at an angle and use the IK limits to keep them from going straight. You still keep the geometry in the same place, but as long as the bones are slightly angled, you won't get that snap as they pop into place. Well, I'm on my way to Palm Springs for the world premiere of PI, so be sure to check out the website for the latest festival news and screening times. And I also want to thank FXPHD for sponsoring this episode. I just finished my XSI 202 course, but they're getting ready to announce the July '09 term, so be sure to check them out and see the new courses on July 1st.